Hi, my name's Mario. The CEO I'm going to be presenting is Jack Dorsey. The reason I picked him is because his name seems very well known. And although I could recognize his name, I didn't know much about him before presenting this project, so I thought it would be an interesting pick. Jack Dorsey was born on November 19th, 1976, as the son of Tim and Marcia Dorsey. During the time, he lived in St. Louis, Missouri, and grew up with a slight speech impediment that would eventually go away. Even so, he showed early academic success during childhood. He showed an interest in computers since a young age. He would eventually go to Bishop DuBourg High School, where he actually joined the computer or computer science club. This would help with his skills like software programming and coding, and it would actually help with his first job. Jack Dorsey got his first job opportunity when he found a vulnerability in a bike dispatch website and emailed the company about it. But as his education continued, he would start college by going to the Missouri University of Science and Technology. After that, he would transfer to NYU, but before graduation, he actually dropped out. It's reported that he actually dropped out only one semester before graduation. After going to school in New York, he decided to move to the Bay Area. More specifically, he actually lived in Oakland. He lived there for 5 years before being hired by a company called Odeo. At the time, it was a current startup. When he was hired, it was being led by Evan Williams, Biz Stone, and Noah Glass. Noah Glass will actually be pretty important to remember for later on. But as a whole, the startup failed, but a good idea did come out of it. The podcasting idea as a startup actually turned into the main idea for Twitter. I'm sure that most people have used Twitter or at least know what it is, so I'll just cover it briefly. It's obviously a social media platform. More specifically, under US law, it would be considered a public platform where anyone around the world can post their content, which is moderated by the terms and conditions of Twitter. What surprised me was that Jack Dorsey is also the CEO of Square. Square started out as a company who was trying to help small business owners handle credit card transactions without having to deal with the excessive bank fees. Something that's also interesting is the idea for Square came to Jack Dorsey by someone named Jim McKelvey, and it started out by just having simple fees of 2.75% of every transaction plus 15 cents. And that was for mobile transactions by using the extension provided. They eventually dropped to 15 cents, so it was only the 2.75% that was taken off of every transaction. But recently, it has changed to 2.6% plus 10 cents. But that can actually vary based on if you have manual transactions, we could actually go higher, or if you have certain discounts, it could go lower to 2.5%. The company realized that modern cell phones had all the requirements to make a credit card transaction, and all that was needed was to make an attachment so the phone was able to read the card. After making attachments for tablets and phones, it dawned on the company that their market was much bigger than they realized, as big retailers also began to buy their products. Square responded to the market expansion by creating new products, and eventually they created products like phone attachments ranging from $10 all the way to register replacements at $1,000. Square continued to show promise as it expanded into branches like Cash App and Square Capital loans. What's interesting about Square Capital is that the loans they gave away were paid back based on the performance of that company. So if they weren't performing well or if they closed, they wouldn't have to pay. But if they were doing better than expected, then they would actually pay more. Jack Dorsey took the company public in 2015. Today, each share is worth about $242. Also, Jack Dorsey himself, as of recording, is worth about $12.8 billion. He doesn't seem to be selfish with his money though, because he is actually auctioning off the first tweet which he owns, and the bets are currently in the millions, and the money is set to go to charity. Not only this, but 1 year ago, he started a fund called Start Small, where he pledged $1 billion of his own Square stocks, which is now worth $4.1 billion. Only $357 million has been spent and given away to charity. That leaves over $3.7 billion left to be given away. I was not sure what could be considered an ethical issue, but if you can recall back to Noah Glass, he was actually fired while Twitter was still being developed, and it's rumored that Jack Dorsey actually supported it and may have aided in the process by persuading the leader at the time, Evan Williams, to actually fire him. To go further, Jack Dorsey was heavily criticized, and many thought he was being stretched thin by being CEO of two companies, Square and Twitter, and thought the evidence was in that Twitter was not seeing the same profits as Square. And as many can remember, Twitter last year in July got hacked, and many celebrity accounts began tweeting about Bitcoin to their fans. Another issue with Twitter specifically has to do with bans and recent censorship, like how Trump was recently banned on Twitter. The reason Twitter can do things like this is due to their terms and conditions. However, some are recently saying that Twitter is benefiting off of the actions of acting like a publisher while also being protected under law as legally being considered a public platform. I believe the argument viewed from one side is that Twitter is not equally enforcing the rules across the political aisle, and that as a public platform, Twitter should remain neutral on all political issues to avoid information bias and the spreading of misinformation. Considering this, while he may seem to be a good leader, I probably would not want him to be my CEO because he does not seem trustworthy and seems unreliable.